State Representative Wendell Gilliard has been busy from Tent City to Columbia, and he's also running for re-election. In this special edition of Quintin's Close-Ups, I sit down with him one-on-one. March 29th. It could be a headline in any newspaper. Wendell Gilliard goes to Washington. I know that you and a couple of residents from Tent City are headed to Washington to talk with the HUD officials about...
Definitely, through this whole endeavor, and I want to somewhat digress.
Sure.
And thank all the organizations, the churches, I think the religious community has always been there, and we're thankful to have them involved in this, but they have been tremendous. The civil rights leaders, everybody, it's what's that old saying? What impacts one person anywhere impacts everybody everywhere. So, this is a people's issue, and that's why we felt the need to take it to the higher level. Because as you well know, the federal government, they're the main supporters to all the nonprofits around the country when it comes to funding these organizations as it pertains to helping our homeless, including our veterans.
And speaking of which, as you know, you took a trip really to Tent City, I guess, 2 weeks ago?
Well, I've been down there so many times. As you well know, I was born in the area, and let me make sure that I state this. Now, that's one of many tent cities, because whether it's Charleston or North Charleston, there are many tent cities a lot of people even haven't been to yet, but they're out there. Yes, they're out there.
And I know that most of those residents had to vacate that space, and I'm wondering, where are you emotional right now with that?
Well, when you talk to the people, and you know that they're people just like us, that old stigma, people are lazy, they don't want to work. No, that's not true. I've met people who've been educators, I've met pastors, I've met women, I've met children. They are family. My father used to always say, son, you're always one step from being homeless. So when you see somebody in need, do what you can, whatever you can. You drop what you're doing and you lend a hand.
That's right.
Yeah. It's about giving them a hand, putting them back on their feet. Okay? You just don't give them a fish to eat for a day. Okay? You teach people how to fish so they can become self-sufficient. And that's why I always tell people, in our research we found out that, it's one thing to house a person, but it's another thing to put a person in a shelter. People are getting away from sheltering. You have to house a person. The person, him or her, once you do that, and they're doing it in many other states now, that's the way they see to the future as to better benefit mankind, whether, whatever the case might be. But we have to look more into housing versus sheltering. Sheltering now, when you talk to the homeless people, you read the research, and we do it a lot. And when I say that, I mean, I do a lot of reading on homelessness. And Mr. Anthony Harrell, he's the president of the Coalition for the Homeless, South Carolina Coalition for the Homeless. He's done tremendous work, and I always give him his accolades. And I base all my efforts on his findings. And then when I read what they're doing in other states, well, you can match his research to other states and see where they have been successful when it comes to housing a homeless person or a homeless family, whatever the case might be. Okay? Yeah.
And let's recreate the scene, because we're sitting here in the area really near our Mother Emanuel, and we just talked off camera where, in fact, the South Carolina State House representatives gave a resolution to Mother Emanuel.
Yes. It was on my go, along with Representative Mack, along with Representative Woodard, and Representative Jefferson. We were the first to sign off on it. They thought it was a fantastic idea, and because of their efforts, we made it possible. We got the resolution passed in the House and the Senate. It was a concurrent resolution. Once we did that, we had it framed, and I presented it to the church. And one of the pastors there, and they were elated. Now you can see it as a holiday statewide. But even more important, in the resolution itself, it asks that, on this day, we examine ourselves to see how far we have come when we talk about race relations, when we talk about economic justice, which would involve housing, jobs, education. We have to play the middle ground now and let people know that, if anything is going to come out of this, we need things of substance. It's one thing to do things that are symbolic. Nothing is wrong with that, okay? But we have to also talk about the things that we need to be talking about, and that's economic justice, because when you look at the church itself, it sits not too far from a historical public housing unit where I was born.
Right.
We need better public housing. We need more housing. We need more diversity when you look at these jobs. When you look at what are we doing in these factories,
right,
these CEO positions,
right,
it has to be based on diversity, because that's the way. I always tell people diversity works. You cannot be too extreme to the left nor the right. You have to have middle ground.
Okay.
Our black brothers and sisters reaping from the $9 billion tourist industry right here in the city. And then when you look at statewide, compared to the city, it's a $19 billion tourist industry statewide. Right. And so when you look at how this money is being spread, what we're reaping from it, we're somewhat dysfunctional. Because I don't see too much housing for minorities. I don't see too much what I would call white collar and blue collar jobs for minorities. And we have to understand that. So these are things that have substance, sure, that needs to come out of this. That we need first to exploit, have solutions, and then start making progress, moving forward.
Well, you've been in Columbia all week.
Yes.
So describe to me the following one word: roads.
Well, I'll be honest with you. Years ago when I was on city council, I spent 10 years on city council. Right. Back then we had the warnings. We were putting the horse before the buggy. Because when you look at all this, the mass development that was going on back in 2006, right, it was written on the wall that we need to slow development up, take care of our infrastructure, but we did not do that. And now we're paying for it in a sense. So we now have to come together, all levels of government, to work our way out of this. They estimate from a statewide level that it would take anywhere from $15 to $20 billion to improve all these roads, the infrastructure. So the question begs, where's the money coming from?
Okay.
Well, you're looking at, I'm a active when it comes to being real. I like to be proactive in this area.
Okay.
And I think the only way we're going to get out of this mess, because it's a mess, that we have to have a gas tax.
Okay.
We haven't had gas tax in decades. And I think we need to wake up to that fact. It wouldn't hurt now to have a gas tax. Something that's reasonable, something that's fair, and something that's really going to benefit the future. But just having a temporary Band-Aid effect, it's not going to help South Carolinians at all. And we have to understand that. See, sometimes it's not always the party you have to listen to, but it's the people. Sometimes you have to go against the party, because it's the people who are right. It's the many people. And a lot of people out of there, they understand that, look, we shouldn't pull monies from education. We shouldn't pull monies where people healthcare have to suffer. You see what I'm saying? We should pull monies from where it needs to come from, somewhere where it's fair and equitable. And the only way you're going to get that, you have to have a gas tax increase.
Well, let's move from legislation to really campaigning. And I know that's backwards, but in your case, you're doing it again.
Yes.
You're running for State House District 111.
Yes, I am.
And I'm wondering, why Wendell Gilliard, why again?
Well, I think if you understand one thing about politics, when you get in a certain position, I've been on city council for 10 years. Right. After 10 years, I elevated myself to the state level by the grace of God and by the votes of my constituents, the approval of them. Evidently, they like what I was doing.
Okay.
Once I get to a certain level in government, you get there, but then you always look up to keep moving forward. Okay? But in the meantime, you want to listen to the ideas of the people. Okay. Once that's generated and you launched off, it takes time to progress. It takes time to put these ideas in action. And that's what happened. if I look up and I say, well, you know what, I really do see a way that we can improve statewide on our infrastructure, statewide on mass incarceration, statewide on more monies for public education. This is what I want to do. Unfortunately, this is a red state, so sometimes those ideas, once you're trying to make progress on them, it takes time because you have to have bipartisan support on both sides. So you have to develop relationship, develop trust, and then your programs move forward. Like my body camera bill, like my synthetic drug bill, employees' wages statewide now. Those ideas took wings. And no matter who gets the credit for them, but the idea came from this individual, and I'm proud to understand that.
And let me piggyback to the body cameras bill, because the Senate just talked about the police cameras in that particular situation. Could you educate me and the views about what happened with that?
Well, that's on the table now. It is law. Matter of fact, the governor, when she signed it into law, she actually gave me the signing pen. That has to be ceremonial, okay? And of course I took pride in that. But the next day, I gave it to Quintin Santana, the guy who actually filmed the incident. He was the true hero in that infamous act. Because had it not been for him recording that most unfortunate incident, you and I wouldn't be having this conversation.
Well, speaking of which, as you know, last night, North Charleston Assistant Police Chief Reggie Burgess basically apologized for the Walter Scott case. And I'm wondering, when you hear that, what goes through your mind, Wendell?
Well, him being black and the type of person he is, I applaud him.
Okay.
It takes a man to do that. It takes a man with vision, a man with heart. And he was speaking from the heart. He was trying to come over as to be sincere, and from my perspective, and I could say a lot of other people, he's always had the credentials to be a police chief for that area, or any area for that matter of fact. The character of the man. I've known this young man for many years. And he's an outstanding man. And that's what I always tell people. As far as law enforcement is concerned, you put a face on it. Well, it's a face like his, and that's why we have to learn how to coexist. You weed out the bad ones, but that profession in itself, we need that. Okay, it's going to always exist, but we're going to have to learn how to coexist. Let's get away, let's get away from damning the profession and going after the people who don't belong there.
Speaking of someone who also speaks from their heart, Bernie Sanders. You're a huge supporter of his.
I still feel the burn.
I was going to say, matter of fact, he just won Utah, Idaho on Tuesday, as well as Arizona, I believe, a week ago. But the map is not there for him. As you know, Hillary Clinton is really winning in delegates and super delegates. And I'm wondering, what assures you, Wendell, that Bernie can still win the White House at this point?
He still can. And that's what I always love about him, when you study about him. Read about the man. I told him this face. Look, anybody who marched with Dr. King when it wasn't popular, anybody who had the audacity to look at Reverend Jackson when Mr. Sanders was mayor of Vermont, he actually took Reverend Jackson under his wings and endorsed him when Jackson ran for president. You see, it's an old saying, don't ever watch what we say, you watch what we do. And when I read his history, anybody who marched with King, anybody who could stand up for righteousness and justice, for our people or any people for that matter, when it was unpopular, they're all right with me. And I'll stand with them any day. Because he's battle worn. His credentials is out there. You could go to any video and see that. He would make a great president, I would think. And I tell people, anybody who questioned his age, that's like saying, well, Wendell, Obama was too black. You know what I mean? Because it's the same principle. You don't judge people by their age, nor their color. You look at their character, and where they have been, the things they have done, and then you draw judgment to make a vote. That's awesome. And that's just the makeup of the man.
That is great.
Yeah.
Well, Representative Wendell Gilliard, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate this.
Always good being here. You keep up the good work,
Thank
and I
you.
hope you still enjoy your state resolution because
Yes.
you still got people out there that know about you and the great work you're doing.
I appreciate it. God is great.
Oh, he is. Thank you.